Yes, mate.
Great shirt, by the way. Probably inept for how bad we played today in the second half.
I know. It's literally the first time I've worn it during a game as well. It's not done me well. I'm not gonna lie.
So Sam, where are you sitting on the suicidometer? What do you got to say about that defeat?
Well, I think if 1 is the suicide and 10 is elation, I think I'm out of 4.
Right.
So I'm obviously fuming that we've lost this game, especially considering the context surrounding it. I kind of, I'll admit, I was thinking we were going to win this 3-1. I saw them scoring, but I just thought, we're going to have too much for them in terms of, we'll have the press in the midfield. Obviously, Basuma being out was a bit of a miss for us, not necessarily because he would have maybe started over Bentancur, but it just meant that we couldn't really change the midfield in that regard. And then Bentancur getting booked so early on just meant that we were walking a tightrope the whole game. I thought that Solanke was going to be getting more service. I don't blame him. I mean, admittedly, I'm not really sure what he was doing with that chance that kind of fell to him. But yeah, I mean, we just don't, we shoot ourselves in the foot all the time. We don't play to our strengths, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say, I'm not Ange out, but I'm definitely reaching the end of my tether with it. I'm not going to lie.
So where do you look, if it's crossed your mind, where would you go next? If Daniel Levy said this is too much, the run since the first 10 games of last season has been too poor. We don't actually have our Tottenham back like he claimed we do. Sam, where do you go next manager-wise? Because that's the thing for me is like, I just don't see at this point where the replacement is, whereas in previous times where we sacked managers, there've always been kind of a queue of options. And if you look at other clubs, look at Man United as an example, literally tried to sack their manager just before the cup final and spoke to loads of other managers and were like, oh, actually, I'm not sure any of them are any better.
No, look, I agree. The depth of managers to kind of call upon is lacking severely. That is true. I think that's why I'm also not really definitely saying I want him gone. I just think that you can argue that we didn't back him sufficiently in the window. I think that was evident considering that was probably, maybe other than Basuma, that was our first choice starting 11, right? Right. With obviously Solanke coming in, you got your first choice back 4. You got the goalkeeper. You can argue whether you would play Maddison and Kulu or Maddison and Sarr as the 2-8s. I personally would have gone with Kulu today. I think that was the right choice. I just think
he played well, actually. I thought he played all right.
Yeah, I agree. He had good glimpses. He had a couple chances, the long shot, and he had that one in the first half where he sort of danced through a couple players and got a snapshot off. But I just think that we don't play to our strengths, and I mean that in the sense of we play this unconventional inverting of the fullbacks, and sort of since I've been on the kind of podcast scene, I've kind of been banging this drum that I don't think it works to constantly invert both your fullbacks. And you've got a player in Pedro Porro who is arguably one of the best players on the ball in our team for sure, but also in the league. I think he's almost second to none in that regard. And we have him playing effectively kind of as like one of our 8/like centre forwards at time. And I think that he needs to be playing on the wing. At one point in the game, I thought maybe the sub might have been Johnson off for Spence and push Porro to that right wing so that he could get those balls into Solanke.
Yeah, that's what Marlon said at the time, actually, yeah.
Well, I think it's just a lot of fans can see that our system relies on players getting the ball into the box. And I don't know about you guys, I don't think I could name one specific instance where the ball actually reached one of our targets in the box other than the short corner we took in the second half where Maddison crossed it in and Van der Ven got the flick. But other than that, I couldn't really tell you one other instance where the ball didn't sail over everyone in the box, even when we had 5 players in the box.
Just the one in the first half where Kulusevski whipped it in towards the far post and Raya had to make a save on it. And kind of Solanke, I think in the end, made the right decision to kind of just let it go, thinking that maybe the keeper wouldn't wouldn't follow the arc of the ball.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that when my biggest concern really, and it sort of goes back on my point about the window, is when he took Maddison off. It's like, what do you actually have to go and change the game? I mean, maybe it would have been too big a call to bring Bergvall on for Bentancur. Sorry, for Maddison.
Yeah.
But bringing on Timo Werner, like, I'm not even necessarily a huge Timo hater, you know. I don't think he's the guy for us. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But when you're gonna like, the what's his name, Martin O'Neill, is he the Wolves manager?
No, Gary O'Neill.
Gary O'Neill, that's it.
Yeah.
He set it up on Monday Night Football. Here's how you play against Tottenham, and basically every single team since then has effectively studied that and come the exact same way. I mean, this is pretty much to a T how Newcastle played against us last week, right?
Yeah.
And it's so obvious that what's going to happen. It was almost like when that corner went out, I had this really painful, overwhelming feeling of, oh, we're going to concede from this.
Yeah.
And when it went in, I didn't even react. I just knew, you know, that's us done. And then he takes off Maddison, brings on Werner, and when Werner comes on, he's a player that thrives in space, and teams don't give us space. So I didn't really understand what that sub was all about, to be honest.
I actually, Sam, I completely agree with you on that, and I said it at the time during the watch long. I actually really feared that when Werner was coming on, like there might be a reaction from the crowd, because I think everybody understands at that point. You know, I don't doubt that they're getting the readings that saying Madders is entering the red zone and he's hitting the line in terms of being fatigued, right? But it's the last 10 minutes of the North London derby, and if you want someone over the ball, kind of to whip a ball in, or if you get a free kick outside the box or whatever, you want Madders on that. And then I agree. So at that point, I would have kept Madders on anyway, and I would have brought on Bergvall to play alongside Madders and alongside Kulusevski, who could have made some little 2 and 3 touch or 1, 2 and 3 touch triangles and move Arsenal about a little bit and get some good crosses in. And I completely agree with you in terms of if you're bringing Werner on, if you're 1-0 up against them and they're pushing on you and there's space in behind, that's where you want him, because he's a good. You know, he's decent at making a yard for himself and a good left foot crosser, and he's half decent at getting in on the back post at the other side. So there are just some weird decisions there. And then I would also suggest, sorry, just one more thing. I would also just suggest that there's just some consistent over this season so far bad decision making amongst the front three that was happening again and again today as well, in terms of we were calling for more crosses to go in the box, but not just little limp, dinked crosses. That you've got to get in the right position and whip them in at pace if you're going to beat players like Gabriel and Saliba. And the only time we did that was that one I mentioned, I think, was the Deki Kulusevski one in the first half. Anyone, Marlon, you want to?
I was going to ask Sam, right? Because you seem a bit frustrated with subs today. But I was going to ask, because obviously we'll talk about the transfer window, but actually in today's game, what was more frustrating for you? Was it the set piece we conceded, or was it actually the subs that Ange ended up putting on afterwards? Because they both, in isolation, had massive effects on the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, conceding a set piece is obviously frustrating. I will say that is our first set piece conceded of the season, and is that a saving grace? Not really.
That's the first one they've scored as well, by the way. That's the first one Arsenal scored this season as well.
I heard that on the Rivals show the other day. And I was thinking, that's quite interesting, because I can't remember what his name was. I think his name was Hooks on the Rival show. He was talking about how Declan Rice is usually the set piece taker.
Yeah.
And his delivery is much better than Saka's. And he was arguing that Saka's delivery had actually not been great. And then obviously, just to our luck, he puts in a perfect corner.
After about the fourth one, though. It was, yeah.
Actually, this is where, sorry, Sam, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is where I will come on a bit strong. It's not that good a delivery, because for me, anything in the keeper's 6-yard box right in front of him, he has to plough through everybody, and which I mean, like, literally push them out the way and get something on it. That is his job.
But for Arsenal, that's what that delivery there is their bread and butter. What they rely on.
All the more reason that he has to be fighting it.
But for us, what I think from what Hooks and what you're trying to say there, that's what Saka wasn't doing with those corners in the first. He was putting them on the front post and whatnot. So the first decent delivery was always going to be the big, massive test for us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're trying to say here. The first decent one he puts in after he's been rubbish all season with them, this was the end result. So it just meant that actually, my question to you is, have Spurs learnt from their set pieces, or was it a case of today we finally come up against a team that can actually play set pieces? Because I know Everton was the other team, but they didn't have Braithwaite, which is a very key to their system.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, that Everton game, at the end of the first half, we were under quite considerable pressure, if I remember correctly. They had sort of 3 or 4 chances and then a bit of a goal-mouth scramble where I think Maddison ended up making 2 crucial headers to get the ball away. So I don't think we have learned from our set pieces. I mean, we've definitely changed a little bit in terms of we're not just defending a zonal marking, which I don't know about everyone, but I thought that was just criminal to be doing zonal marking. I remember seeing teams doing it as I sort of grew up watching football, thinking, what are these guys doing? I mean, that's awful. And then to be one of those teams that does it was devastating. Admittedly, I still see, like, in the game, you're watching Maddison mark Ben White. And I know that Ben White's their disruptor, but I mean, surely that's a mismatch, right?
I think he's just trying to block. I think he's trying to block the blocks, right? But I would just add one more thing if we're going to just finish this conversation about the set pieces. In 2 of the games, Dragusin was playing, and he's correct.
A monster. He's a monster in the air.
He loves it in the air, and so we missed him. But also, of course, you play Romero and Van de Ven. You do, so it's difficult.
Yeah, no, definitely, and I do actually think. I did notice, not necessarily on the set pieces, but I thought that Van de Ven was actually quite good in the air today, where normally that is a bit of his problem. Is I don't think he's, considering how big he is, he's never that dominating. But I thought he did quite well against Havertz. Like their system was obviously, like most teams, just to set up and try and do long ball counter, and I thought he actually did quite well. But admittedly, I thought that his decision making this game, Van de Ven, was not great, and actually, to be honest, a lot of our players didn't have great decision making. But we play into teams' hands by trying to play out the back. I'm not saying I don't want to play out the back, but you know, there was one chance that Arsenal had. We played it along the back like 2 or 3 times, and then it went back to Vicario. He tried to play a long ball. It went to Ben White. He played one pass, and they were in behind for a potential chance, and I think they won a corner off that. And you're just inviting this pressure, which is frustrating. Obviously, you've brought in Solanke, and he's also better in the air. And I thought Solanke had quite a good game today, other than that one chance. I'm sure he'll get criticism on Twitter for missing that chance, but he did kind of all he could do. You know, he had good hold-up play. He brought players in. He made a nuisance of himself. We just didn't find him enough. And I think that's ultimately where the frustration lies, that, you know, you don't capitalize on their frailties in terms of, you know, a lack of mobility in midfield with Partey and Jorginho, and Odegaard's lack of precision up front. So it's frustrating. And I'm here kind of after the game. Now, I actually thought I was going to be more angry on this stream, to be fair, but I've kind of talked myself off the ledge, if I'm honest.
Sam, I appreciate you calling in, mate. I want to give you a chance to end with some positivity. We're going to turn over Coventry in the Carabao Cup, aren't we?
Yeah, definitely. Look, and I think the one positive I've taken from the game is we didn't concede a counter-attack. I know we conceded a corner, but we didn't concede the bread and butter goal that we concede practically every game or every other game. So I will say that we limited them to few chances. They just are clinical, and that's the frustration at the moment. You know, as much as we hate to admit it, they're a good team, and this was always going to be a tough test, but there wasn't going to be a better chance for us to play them in terms of lineups, and them not actually being in the greatest of form, contrary to what the table actually shows. But you know, it wasn't to be, and you know, we go on next week and we smash Coventry. That's how it has to be.
That's it. My prediction is if we win all 34 of the remaining Premier League games, we'll have a shot at the title. Sam, thank you so much for calling in, mate. Really appreciate it.